Hi, and welcome to week 6. We are finally at the end of the class. I just want to remind you that the last day of class is Thursday this week. If you need any help or a little extra time, let me know as soon as possible so that we can, work it out so you can have as much time as you need to be able to do the best job that you can. So we are rounding up this class with Australia, New Zealand, and the South Pacific Islands. Now, Australia is obviously an island with the island of Tasmania off the southern tip. It has the Indian Ocean to the west and the Pacific to the east, the Coral, Timor, and Afura Seas to the north. And to the south, you have the Southern Ocean. If we look at it, Australia sits in the middle of a tectonic plate. The continent itself is not being pushed on, it's not being pulled on, it's in a very stable place. So it doesn't experience earthquakes and, excuse me, tsunamis. New Zealand, however, is on the boundary between two plates that actually goes between the North and South Island, and volcanoes and earthquakes are actually quite common here. So these areas are different tectonically. We're going to see that they're different in some of their culture, but they're actually what I would call a polycentric region because they share things that are in common. All right, now let's look at the physiography of Australia. And what we can see here is that along the east, we have the Great Dividing Range. This is the one big mountain range that is found in Australia. Excuse me. And it forms these eastern uplands. Now, this is a humid temperate climate with no dry season and a hot summer. So it's really your tropical climate. To the west, as you enter into the central lowlands, it's got more of a dry and arid climate. And right in the middle here, you'll see the Great Artesian Basin. Now, it's called that because there is an enormous reservoir of aquifer water below it that can be used to go to any other place that they want and to pipe it. So they actually have kind of a good setup in the fact that it's relatively nearby this coast and that it is full. So that's a benefit. Also in this land, this is where you have like extensive pasture lands, you have livestock, and you have crops. So it's another good place to have the availability of the artesian water so that you can farm this land and not have to worry about the fact that the climate really is getting drier. Because if you move on to the middle of the continent, you see that you basically have a desert. So on the east, you have this humid area, and then next to it, you have this area of grasslands where you can farm, you have water, and then nothing really changes until you get to the southwest coast, where again, you have a humid temperate climate, and this is where the city of Perth is. We're going to see if you overlay the climate map with the population map, it is pretty much a one-to-one thing. So here's the population centers you can see. Down here on the south east, you have the New South Wales Sydney area. And this is the area where is the only major river system on the entire continent. It's the Murray-Darling River system. And this river basin is what feeds the water down into the people who live in this portion of the country. Let me go back a few. There. As was noted in Southeast Asia, there were periods of lower sea level and cooling for the last over the last 50,000 years. There have been migrations of people, plants, and animals to Australia that aren't found anywhere else in the world. Uh, there are wallabies and kangaroos and platypuses, which are all marsupials. And marsupials are those that carry their young in pouches. Now, apparently, large predators never made it to the island because these marsupials are kind of at the top of their food chain. So something above them would have already eaten them. It's not just the animals, it's the plants that are unique as well. There are multiple varieties of eucalyptus and other plants that are only found in Australia. And over this time, the plant and animal species have become dependent on each other, and they've actually adapted to the needs of the other over a period of time, as this was an isolated area. So the Aboriginal people have been in Australia for about 50,000 years now. And it stayed that way until, guess what? Yes, it stayed that way until the British came over and decided that they wanted to have a penal colony there, but also create a free town where people who wanted to leave Britain and didn't have anywhere else to go, that they could go there and own land and live freely. So that happened in the 18th century, and then in 1901, the country became the Commonwealth of Australia, and they have a healthy immigration program. About 140 to 200,000 people come every year. Some are relatives of people who have migrated earlier. Others are asylum seekers, and then others are just people like you and me who would like to go to live in Australia, and as long as they consider us good to be a productive member of their community, it's actually one of the easiest places to emigrate to. All right, now climate change. If you look at Australia down in the corner here, this is the Great Barrier Reef that runs 2,700 miles along it. And we've talked before about warming temperatures in the sea, and the effects of the oceans becoming more acidic. And if you look at the damage that has been done, and this is just in the last 30 years, in the far north, they figure that at least 26% of it is now dead. That in the north, 67% is dead. As you go to the south, it's healthier. But this isn't just happening to the Great Barrier Reef. This is happening to the reefs in Belize, around islands in the Pacific. And it's not something that once the ecosystem breaks down, it's gone. It's not like you can breathe health and life back into it. It actually is just it's gone. And the people who depended on the reef, whether it was for tourism or for food, have now lost that source of income or food. All right, so now let's look at the Pacific Islands. And the Pacific realm is a large area that has thousands of islands that they subdivided into three realms: Polynesia, Micronesia, and Melanesia. Actually, these would be regions. Now, this area is extremely tectonically active. You can see all of the lines on here are each faults or thrusts. And what it means is that all these little pieces are moving in different ways. So this is an extremely active area. You have chains of volcanoes, you have earthquakes, you have trenches. And so when we talk about this portion of the area closest to Australasia, that this is where you have all of the volcanics. As you move out, you have more simple tectonic boundaries, but most of them are active as well. Now, this is Papua New Guinea, and we talked about it a little last week. The western half, Papua, was taken over by Indonesia. And the east half, Papua New Guinea, is its own country. And it has numerous islands to it, but it has some main islands: New Ireland, New Britain, and Bougainville. And what I want to do for the rest of this lecture is to focus on Papua New Guinea and to share about it. I lived there for part of a summer and worked for the university, and it really opened my eyes to a lot of things. And it's one of the things that made me love world regional geography, because I realized there's so much that I don't know. So the island of Bougainville has one of the world's richest and largest copper mines on it. And it, about 20 years ago, revolted against the mine owners and decided that it wants to be its own country. And even though 99% of the people say that they want it to be their own country and there's no influence of the government from Port Moresby in Papua New Guinea over them, they still haven't been allowed to become their own country. So they're really in limbo. New Britain and New Ireland are, and and the main island of Papua New Guinea are also pieces of like continent, little pieces of continent that broke away from things, and they just kind of floated around until they ran into something and stopped. So these have not just oceanic crust, which is usually the lava and the fertile soil. These actually have gold deposits and copper deposits and oil and gas. And so that makes them different from a lot of the other islands here too, because they actually have continental land masses on them. There are more than 7 million people who live in Papua New Guinea, on more than 600 islands. Excuse me. This is just south of the equator, so the climate is humid, equatorial, and it's surrounded by various seas. And they'll have coral reefs in them. They're all very beautiful. They're tourist attractions. The capital of Port Moresby is on the mainland, and you can see it here. And what happened is that it was the Australians who really came in and after the British and took into Papua New Guinea, and they basically recolonized it. And so most of the people, most of the residents who live in New Guinea, came from Africa over 50,000 years ago, or during that time. And so they're very dark skinned. And then some Polynesians migrated over and they live on the coasts. And then when I was there and someone met me, their first question was, "Are you from Australia?" Because there's resentment towards the government because the people who have the power in the government are still Australian and not native Papuans. And I said, "No, I'm from the United States." And he was like, "That's cool." And he could have cared less. He didn't think anything about the United States. As long as I was an Australian, I was going to be okay with him, which was just so eye-opening because I realized just how America centric I feel like the rest of the world was. And it's a really, really good and humbling experience. There are really good natural ports in Papua New Guinea, on the mainland. So you have a setup where you can have your commerce come in and out. Um, the spine of the, oh my God, it's not on here. There it is. Okay, sorry about that. The spine along the top of New Guinea is this mountainous range, and it's called the Highlands. And 85 of the native Papuans live there. They have their own tribes. They have their own religions and rituals. They have their own wars going on with other groups from the Highland, and they really still live pretty independently from what the rest of most people do. They seem very happy. I mean, they're farming the way that they farmed before. They're automatically taking care of the land that they live on, because they know the ecology and they've worked with it for, thousands of years. They know to hunt, and when they hunt and they make a sacrifice of the animal, they thank their gods. And there's a very strong, hierarchy from the chief down in the group, and the way that burials are done. And none of them seem like they're lacking anything. They don't seem like they think, "Oh, I need a TV or a Game Boy," even if they know what one is. It was just kind of amazing to see that. Um, they would burn the grass around wherever they are because there are poisonous asps there, the snakes. And so if there's any grass higher than like 2 inches, they go and they burn it because they're scared to death of the snakes. Um, the one of the nicest, one of I think the neatest animals that they have on PNG is these birds of paradise, and they're not found anywhere else in the world. And they have these wild, beautiful plumages and these mating colors, and the feathers are very valuable to the chiefs over there. A lot of the people chew beetle. It's caught, QAT, but they chew it incessantly, and then they spit it out, and there's red spit everywhere that you go. It's apparently addictive. The fact that uh, the Kina, which is their equivalent to the dollar, was stronger than the dollar when I was there, spoke something about the strength of their economy. Um, Now, their economy is based on oil and gas, gold and silver, copper, timber. There are some remnant plantations of banana and sugar cane and spices. And then there are palm oil plantations there too. Now, the altitudinal zonation is different. Some of the mountains are up to 14,000 feet. When you go in towards the interior, there are no roads. It's a rainforest, so there are a lot of mudslides, and there aren't airports, and it's very remote. If you want to go from the south to the north side of the island, you actually have to take a boat or a plane because you can't get there from here. Um, their government is a parliamentary democracy, just like they have a prime minister and a parliament and a Supreme Court. And you would think with all of these natural resources and this, government that's been in place, that you would have something that you would think of maybe as a less developed country, and not a more developed country. But the thing that I saw there that was the worst was the amount of government corruption. Um, the oil companies came in and promised to build roads and houses and shelters and clinics in the highlands if the native tribes would give them access to drill on their land. And and one of the tribes didn't want to and told them no, but they ended up getting the go ahead from the government and ended up mining part of it and putting mercury down the rivers and killing all the fish in it, which the people were dependent on. Um, Deforestation, because it's a tropical rainforest, excuse me, was outlawed, because logging those hardwoods there is illegal. And I was on the Coral Sea, and I saw this container ship that was stacked as high as you could see with teak, and it was a Japanese ship just sailing right out of the harbor. um the the different levels of government criminality that I saw across the board were shocking. But what got me the most was the fact that the people in the highlands, you know, they didn't care about anything unless it affected the tribe and the people that they loved. And it was just so refreshing to not see a culture that has to compete with one another. They have Sing Sings, which are these yearly celebrations, where they all get dressed up in their finery, and it's just a celebration of life and of death. And it's a beautiful thing to withhold. And they've been doing this for thousands of years. And I thought to myself, who am I that I would want to influence a culture in thinking that my way is a better way to live than the way that they're actually living their lives. Um, and the people were beautiful and wonderful and kind, and a little girl had never seen blonde hair before, and when I let her touch it, she shrieked. It was just it was just the most outstanding experience, the most humbling experience I'd ever been through. um in Port Moresby, the rate rape was 60% of all women over 12. um these are the kinds of things that I can sit here every week and give all the world regional geography. Well, here's the economy. Here's why people live where they live. Here's why, how they make money. Here's who decides the laws. Do they have infrastructure? And after that experience, I just realized that it's very important to know everything that we've learned in this course, but it's also very important to know that we really don't know something unless we experience it for ourselves. And it doesn't have to be overseas. It could be in the town next door. It could be, on a mountain in Colorado. It's just being willing to be open to knowing that you don't know everything, but what you can take from this class is you do know something, and that's something to build on. So I hope that you have enjoyed this class as much as I have. I hope you don't think I talk too much, which I generally do, but thanks for having a great class and a final week. And I wish you all the best in your future endeavors. Thanks.